Everyone tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here.
Great. So I'll go ahead and get started. I actually have turned on my stopwatch, so I know how much time is going on. Okay. So we know a bit about who I am. Okay. Parent of a 2E child, Gerard Consulting, etc. I just want to stop for a moment before we begin, and I'm curious about who you are. You're welcome to put some info in the chat or just sort of hold it in your mind. I'm wondering if some of you have children in what we would call the public, traditional school or a private traditional school that has these traditional kind of writing assignments. And I know that maybe some of you in the group are in alternative schools or homeschooling, or you might be in one group and curious about the other group. So what I'm going to be talking about today is a little bit about what students go through in a more traditional environment and why that can be a problem and how AI can play a role in this. So goals, so many goals today. First thing I do want to say to you is there's no way I'm going to get through everything. There's just so much to say about AI. I did make a handout. The handout is full of tools, AI tools, and it sort of lists if your child is having this issue, you can try this AI tool, but be careful because there is a danger zone for this. So that I will share with everyone, okay? But what I want to do today is sort of take a moment to create some guiding principles because AI is huge, it's all over the place, and truly nobody has a best practice yet. So to talk about some guiding principles, and we're going to do that through a case study of a student named Nora. Okay. Now, in schools today, I think we all know, we've all heard that people are responding to the fact that AI can now write for us, right? And they have different responses. Some schools have returned to everyone's writing with a pen, pen and pencil, and that's it. And we know for some of our neurodiverse students, that is not appropriate nor fair. We can talk about that as well. Other schools are on the other end of the spectrum, and they've just been saying the future is AI. We're all going to write with AI. Let's teach our students how to do that. Okay. So first, I do want to say when we're talking about AI, I'm going to share with you that I do think that AI takes some of the work away. It takes some of the learning process away. It's very easy to kind of offload our thinking and our memory and the writing process onto AI. But before we talk about that, I do want to say yes, yes, yes to new AI-powered tools that enable text to be turned into speech, like immersive readers, or that enable your child's speaking to be turned into text with the power of AI, or screen simplification tools, which remove distracting objects. 100% yes. I don't think that's an issue that we need to discuss. But let's move on to some of the more, concerning practices. I wanted to share with you. Some of you may be familiar with Read and Write. This is a wonderful AI-powered tool that's constantly evolving. You may have it through your child's school, and you can also get a license as a parent or a family for, it's like under $200 a year. So, all right. I do need to stop for a moment because I wanted to mention, I know that some of you in the audience actually have younger kids. So here's what's going to happen today. I'm going to share a case study. It's going to be about a girl who's in middle school, okay? And it's going to walk you through her experience writing a middle school style paper. But for those of you who have 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, everything that your children's teachers are doing in class with them is building towards this type of traditional assignment that you can kind of see here. They're teaching them sentence structures and paragraphing. They're kind of within this paradigm. So after my talk today, even those of you here with younger kids can have a sense of what's coming ahead and if that would be right for your child or not, and be able to ask better questions to future potential schools about what kind of practices they have in the writing classroom. So super quickly, we all know writing does not equal intelligence. This type of essay here, this very linear structure that not every child is good at, not every person is good at, it's an artifact of the educational system. It's just a nice, neat, two-dimensional way to put a stack of papers into your book bag, carry it home, and grade it. Let's look at this for a second. This is gorgeous. What is this? This is another way to write a paper. It's just not linear. So look at this beautiful thesis, this beautiful inquiry question. Did researchers impose a modern bias on their understanding of women's lives in roads in the 1950s. What a gorgeous question. And there's no writing, there's just curator audio statements. So no writing actually had to happen. Is the essay I showed you on the previous slide a signal of greater intelligence? Absolutely not. Okay, so let's jump into our case study. I'm going to talk to you about a girl named Nora, and she is a 7th grader. She is 2E. She's highly verbal. She is super anxious, a perfectionist, has ADHD, and very selective about what she wants to read and what she wants to do. And of course, to no surprise, she hates English class. This may be some of your younger children perhaps in the future. So we'll talk about Nora. Now, Nora is not on the autism spectrum, but I will make some comments about this process for some of her classmates who might be. So Nora, poor Nora, she's in 7th grade. She's in a traditional school, and she is tasked with writing an essay about Call of the Wild. Some of you may be familiar with this book. I do not like this book. It was written by a racist, and it's very violent. Often teachers of literature have to teach books that they don't want to teach in a traditional school. So let's think of Nora, right? Perhaps Nora is not quite so interested in this book. Let's take a look at the assignment that her teacher gives her. Write a 5-paragraph essay about the Call of the Wild that answers the following question. To what extent does the main character, Buck, exhibit regression over the course of the novel? Okay, promise I'm getting to the AI part. Okay, but first we just need to stop for a second and see what Nora is even doing. So, Nora, how does Nora feel? Okay, what are all the things you need to do when you write a paper? And by the way, this is starting for your kids in 4th and 5th grade. They're going to start doing these types of things. You have to read the book, you have to understand the question, then you have to outline it, draft it, and then hand in some sort of revised, finished piece. Now, you'll notice here that one of my rows is pink. And this is the crux of my philosophy related to AI and writing. There are some places that I do not believe AI technology should touch in the writing process, okay? So we're going to talk about how we might read a book with the aid of technology, AI, understanding the task with the aid of AI, maybe revising at the end, correcting grammar errors with the aid of AI. But there's a piece in the middle that is the most fundamental part of writing where you need to understand what you've read and think about what you want to prove and think about how you're going to say it and how you're going to convince people and the order you want to put things in. That is the scary part of writing. That's the struggle, and that's a healthy struggle, an exciting struggle, a challenging struggle that should not be offloaded to AI. Our 2E children are very, very, very smart. And I believe our job is to allow them to really dive into the meat of the thinking and make the journey kind of before when you read and when you write after, make that a little more accessible, more pleasant with AI, okay? And I'm going to show you what that looks like for Nora. So how does Nora feel about this assignment? She hates the book. She doesn't like reading if something isn't interesting to her, or attention is an issue here. Finding quotes in the book, she has to find sentences to sort of back up what she says. That's difficult. Remember that slide, a few slides back, I showed you that kind of awful prompt, right? Does anybody here remember what that prompt for the essay was? It was like, to what extent does the main character exhibit regression over the course of the novel, right? When you have ADHD and you don't like the book to begin with, this is going to be really difficult. When people think about writing, they're often focusing in their mind on the actual writing, but I'm here to tell you that without engagement in the book and without understanding the task, no writing is going to happen. So let's keep going with Nora. Okay, you can imagine she doesn't love putting her ideas on paper. Okay, that's difficult for her. We can imagine that turning thoughts into paragraphs is very difficult for her. And we might also imagine that by the time she's written a draft, and then the teacher tells her, well, I'd like you to look it over again and revise it, she's done. She's just emotionally done. Now, very quickly, I'm going to share with you what I would do instead of this assignment that I don't think is even going to work for her. Okay, so this would be perhaps you might not find this approach in a traditional school, but in an alternative school you would. Number one, the student should choose a book that they love. Number two, the student should choose the essay questions. They shouldn't be forced to answer a particular question. Number three, when it's time for them to start thinking, oh my gosh, what is this outline going to look like? Number one, it shouldn't have to be in lines. That's the biggest problem with the word outline, is it's lines of text. There's a million different ways to get through this beautiful pink part of the process that doesn't involve a computer, doesn't involve AI. You can storyboard it on paper, you can draw it, you can work it through with Play-Doh. I have a student who's basically a professional ballerina who will do an interpretive dance when she's trying to think about where to put her thoughts when she wants to write a paper, okay? And then we're going to get into this, but further down in the writing process, speech to text, use all the technology you want. And there's also nice technology for revising, although we could talk about whether or not that's a danger area. Okay, let's move on. So let's talk about AI now. Now is the AI, and I have this all in the handout with links, okay? So Nora really doesn't like this book. It's violent. There's a lot of violence against dogs and violence against people, and it's very disturbing for her, okay? How do we get her to engage with this book? We can use something called Notebook LLM, which I think some of you may have used. I'm going to show you in the next slide what that looks like, okay? To actually have a conversation with the book, okay? To sustain attention, Notebook LLM has a function called storyboard. And to find quotes, let's just go to the next slide and take a look at Notebook LLM, okay? So here's what it is. Kind of looks like ChatGPT, but you upload a PDF of the book in question, okay? And then you don't have to worry about hallucinations. And you can have all kinds of conversations with this book. So you'll see here that Nora asked, who is the main character of the book? She wanted to learn more about this main character. Do you notice how there are circles? The numbers have circles. You click on those and it shows you the actual quote from the text where the system is pulling the information. Okay, so this is really fun to play around with. But I think more than that, and important for someone like Nora, a 2E child, is these capacities. So you can upload a PDF of Call of the Wild, which she doesn't like yet. And you can have an audio overview. AI now has much nicer sounding read alouds, which is important for comprehension. Quizzes, flashcards, that's fine, automatically generated. But take a look at this mind map. Let me show you what that looks like. Now this is interesting because it's taken the book and you have the kind of the title, The Call of the Wild. And then you have this section in light blue that divides it into chapters. And then you see you can click on one of the chapters and it'll sort of subdivide it. And this is an interesting visual way to read a book. And it may be 20 years from now, this is how people read books. Oh, excuse me. Fair enough. Okay. The second thing I would like to talk to you about that many of you are probably familiar with and that your kids will start using as they get older or now is ChatGPT's study and learn mode. You see here, you can select this every time. Now, obviously, a child has a choice to select it or not. And here's what you can do with it, okay? You can use it to connect with the book, and that's really important. And I think it's worth it to just take a minute and look at this here. First, let me go back for a second. What if Nora is trying to figure out what on earth that prompt even meant? Okay, she has ADHD, she doesn't like the book, focusing on the words is hard. If you remember, the prompt had the word regression in it, okay? So she types here, what does the word regression mean in Call of the Wild? Because that's what she's supposed to write about. And then it says here, good question. Let's think about it step by step. We don't have time to read all of this, but the last thing that ChatGPT generates here is, what do you think regression might mean? And then they can converse back and forth. Will a sensitive, anxious child become so in love with this that they don't want to discuss books with people anymore? That is an interesting question, and one that, is kind of, it's something, a parent would and a teacher would understand about a specific child. For Nora and for many of my students, it does become an issue. They really fall in love with this. Now, here's another thing that's interesting. If the child is not interested in the book that they are forced to read and are not in a position to be able to choose their own book, which they should be, they can become more emotionally invested in it by being allowed to ask questions that they want to ask. So Nora heard from me that the author of the book is racist. So she asks in study mode, should we read this book? The author is racist, okay? And she gets an answer. And it's important, if you see here on the second line, ChatGPT responds, before I say more, I'm curious, what do you think? Should we? So they converse about it a little, okay? And ChatGPT, the chatbot, eventually says, do you want me to talk to you about how people read this book today? Because we know the guy's a racist. Now, Nora loves this. Okay, so then she was able to ask her teacher if she could change the topic of her essay, and she was allowed to. So this is the question Nora wants to answer. Is the guy racist and sexist, and does it show up in the novel? And here is the thesis statement she comes up with. London's racist and sexist values show up in the novel in 3 ways. How he talks about Native Americans, how he talks about female humans, and how he talks about female dogs. And she was a lot more interested in writing this essay than the one that was originally put forth to her. Now, in a traditional public or private school, you might not even be able to change the topic of your essay, but it's something to think about. 7:31. Okay. When you get to the part where a student has read and connected with a book, and she needs to think about what she wants to write, this is where I say, just leave the AI out of it. Please draw a picture, do a dance, use Play-Doh. Technique I often use is it's drawn out in some way. Then we move over to Google Slides. I provide some templates to guide them along. And then they can do speech to text. They can just sort of talk out their thoughts along with the template, and lo and behold, they've accidentally written paragraphs that, didn't really feel like writing paragraphs. And again, this is what I mean by, making the really important part of the journey, the critical thinking, the deciding what you want to say, making it really as pleasant as possible so students can feel successful. Now, finally, when people think about writing, they're usually thinking about the actual writing, right? Like, I sat in front of a white screen and I was paralyzed. So that happens to Nora. She's paralyzed, but we already talked about use speech to text, or use an AI tool called Otter AI. It not only records everything she says or everything that you say during a coaching session, or, it can organize it and put it into bullet points and, just show it in different ways. There is another AI tool called Co-Writer, which is excellent for students with written expressive disorders and ADHD, because it'll predict words for you, using statistical knowledge about language and language co-occurrences. I don't know if we have time to get into using quotes, but I'll just say, as your child gets older and is writing for school, finding quotes in a book and putting them in their essay is the hardest thing that they'll do. It's the hardest part. And there are ways to use ChatGPT to do that, okay? But it takes some coaching. That's why I put this square in red, kind of a caution. Okay, finally, final draft. Nora typically, when she was asked to revise a final draft, just noped out of the situation. I'm not going to do it. Wouldn't do it. So, few things. These two choices on the far left, right, are in pink because to me, pink means no AI. Let the student decide what they want to revise so they're not overwhelmed. Let the student choose an authentic audience, some way to publish it or show it to somebody so that revising it feels different. It has a purpose. Finally, we have an AI tool, Read and Write. I showed you that way at the beginning, the slide, Read and Write through Everly. The company is Everly. It has audio and written feedback through a chatbot on what you've written, which is really nice because they can hear it and see it. Okay. Finally, you can use ChatGPT Study and Learn Mode as a writing coach to help you with your organization. Now, I would say that AI should be used to make, I say, sweeten the journey, okay? Kind of at the beginning, kind of at the end, so that the most important thing, the thinking and the deciding and the, that healthy struggle to determine what you want to say is kind of kept safe for students to do on their own and not offload, because this is where I think that 2E students will really shine. And that's what I'm able to share today. There's a lot more to say. I have a handout again that has links and sort of is a list of everything I just said with links to where you can go. For those of you who have older kids, I hope that this was able to help you think about what your child is going through and maybe help you think about what kind of school or educational environment would be best to help your child with writing. And for those of you with younger ones, I hope it helps you think ahead. So, questions?
That is fantastic. Thank you, Jessica. That was a really great way kind of to think it through and walk through the process. Are there any questions from